Good evening. Here we are once again on a Saturday evening when I'm recording this. It's been kind of a crazy week for me, maybe for you too, but I've been in Denver with seniors on their senior trip. Had to fly back in, Friday morning. Yeah, I went to the airport. Had to drive 2 hours to get to Denver airport, catch a plane to fly to Atlanta to drive to South Carolina for a ladies meeting. Anyway, crazy busy week. And when I left Colorado, we had about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground and it was 30 degrees. Landed in Atlanta where it was 78, I think it was, and sunny. So anyway, besides all the traveling, all the different climates and everything, I'm just glad to be home. I have just run in the door, changed it in comfortable clothes because I didn't want a week to go by without getting back to you. We missed last week, I think, because of a program or event or something like that. So I didn't want another week to pass. And I'm going to deviate just a little from our What You Do Best in the Body of Christ. And it's just a timely lesson. I've taught it many years and it's on, well, it's actually called Facts of Life. And I'm sure that would get a lot of interest listed as that. We'll call it also Wisdom for Living maybe. But I have a book that's entitled Everything You Should Know After High School. And so a lot of times I've taught it to seniors, but I live by these principles. I think of them often. They're good for all adults. Anyway, I hope you'll listen. I'll probably do just little short segments on this. I think there are enough for maybe 3 or probably 4 lessons out of it. And I'm just going to get you started today. And then I hope you'll just listen in over the next few weeks as I continue to do this. And so we're just going to talk about things that you should know, because truthfully, people don't know things that they should know when they graduate. Going into adulthood, you can keep your sanity if you have good, wise thoughts about what's going to happen in life. So that's where we're coming from today. You remember in Deuteronomy chapter 6, it says that the things of God, to teach them to your children and to your children's children. You know, those are things that we pass down through the ages. So we'll just kind of jump in right here, and I'm going to give you a verse with all of the 10 things that I give you tonight. And the first one is life is hard. Did you know that? Life is hard. Job 5:7 says this: man is born unto trouble as the sparks fly upward. Have you ever seen a spark go downward? Like if you hold a candle or a lighter or anything and you tip it like this, the flames are still going up. As surely as flames go up, life is going to be hard. Man is born unto trouble as the sparks fly upward, because that's what they always do. Trouble is always going to be part of everyday life. Sometimes we wake up thinking it should be an easy day, but it doesn't take much for us to realize that it's not going to be as good a day as we thought. It could be something as simple as you're out of hair gel. One of the girls on the trip this week said, I need some mousse. Does anybody have mousse? And everybody said, I have gel. And she's like, okay. It could be something so simple as that. I love the story of the little girl watching her baby brother being born. Why she was watching, I don't know. That's for another story, another day. But anyway, I don't think they do it anymore, spank their bottoms, once a baby is born to get their lungs cleared out when they cry out or whatever. But her little baby brother was being born, and the doctor did spank him when he was delivered. And the doctor looked at the little girl and said, what do you think of that? And she said, he shouldn't have crawled up in there in the first place. Don't you just love a child's wisdom? While we're thinking of wisdom for this lesson. But a hard life started in the Garden of Eden, if you think about it, when Adam and Eve thought they could improve on paradise. And ever since then, we live in a world marred by sin, and sometimes life is just hard. I always think, life is hard compared to what? Yeah, it's definitely easier. Yeah, life is just hard, for sure. But how do you deal with the bad day? If we think of everything that we have to be grateful for, because the Bible says that he daily loadeth us with benefits. Daily loadeth us with benefits. And you've probably heard me say it before. Every day, I try to be careful to say, Lord, thank you that I can see and hear and taste and touch and smell and think and talk and walk and remember. And sometimes we take all of those kind of things for granted, but there are people who are not able to do that. So everything that we can do, we should be thanking him for. I heard this question mentioned years ago, and I have never forgotten it. What if God were to take away from you today everything that you have failed to thank him for today? Like sometimes when you pray, you think, it sounds so redundant. Well, we have a lot to be thankful for every day, and God doesn't get tired of hearing that we thank him for that. So number 1, life is hard. It's just part of life. Number 2, life isn't fair. Ecclesiastes 9:11 says, time and chance happeneth to them all. Rains on the just and on the unjust, the Bible says. It surely does. And sometimes life doesn't seem fair. Bad people often get ahead and seem to prosper, and good people often suffer a lot. Some of you know, have probably heard me say of my friend, and I won't give her name, but years ago, she was raped in a mall parking lot about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and she and her husband had been trying to have a baby. Well, she ended up pregnant after she had been raped, and she didn't know if the baby were her husband's or the rapist, and she carried the baby 9 months just trusting God for however it turned out. She said it wasn't going to be the baby's fault, and so and she wasn't going to, sacrifice his life there. So she carried the baby 9 months, not knowing. When she had the baby, it was her husband's, and what a joy that was. But she taught me a great lesson in that. She says, good things have happened, worse things have happened to good people. Excuse me, let me start that over. Worse things have happened to better people even today. And she said that was what her thought process was as she was going through all of that. And our family, it's in our devotion book, and I mentioned it, that 90 Days to Knowing God Better. In our family, we don't even have to finish the statement. We just say worse things, and it just pulls everything into perspective. Worse things have happened to better people, even today. Yeah, for sure. Sometimes life isn't fair, but remember this, although life may not be fair, God always is. God is never unfair. It would be against his righteousness to be unfair. He's not the source of unfairness in our lives, ever. Don't allow yourself to think life isn't fair. Don't allow your children to say that that's not fair. I remember when Monica first started teaching, and the position that was open was for first grade. And she does great on every level. She's taught first and fourth and junior high and senior high. She's kind of taught a lot of areas there and has the degrees to do that. But when she taught first grade, the kids were prone to say, that isn't fair. And she wouldn't allow them to do that. She said, I'll tell you what's not fair. What's not fair is that Jesus died on a cross having done no sin. And he did that so you could live. And that's not fair that he had to do that. She said, so other than that, we don't say anything's not fair. And they learned a great lesson when she was teaching that class. But think about Joseph. I think about him all the time in the Bible because he was so mistreated by his own family, by his brothers. They were going to kill him. Then they threw him in a pit. Then they sold him into slavery. And then he was accused of things in Potiphar's house, and just all of the things. He was forgotten. He was separated from his family and friends, but God promoted him. God saw all of the unfairness, and God brought it back around for good. I always think, his brothers didn't like him in his coat of many colors, and when they see him 40 years later, he has on Pharaoh's coat of many colors. He's still wearing many colors. I think God has a little bit of a sense of humor there. But God is always fair. It's not in his nature to not be fair. I heard about an elderly grandmother. She was greatly disturbed by her many problems, and her grandchildren said, Grandma, we've done all we can for you. You just have to trust God. And she said, oh dear, has it come to that? Yeah, it's come to that. That's what we have to do. So number 1, life is hard. 2, life isn't fair. Number 3, when truth is rejected, life becomes unlivable. When truth is rejected, life becomes unlivable. Judges 21:25 says, in those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes. That's true. If you read Judges 21, it's an interesting chapter because the wars had taken place. They didn't save enough women for the men, single men who still needed wives. So the men were advised to just hide in the bushes along the roadway. And when the maidens came out to dance, you just see which one you like and just go claim that one to be your bride. Yeah, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. People have come to think that right and wrong are decided different ways. Personal opinion, feelings, culture. Remember Athaliah, she wanted to be queen, so she killed off all of her grandchildren except one that was hidden. They think laws are the final authority, but if they go against God's laws, they do not. And all of those things are constantly changing. Personal opinions, feelings, culture, laws, they're all constantly changing. You have to find some foundation to hang on to, and that is God and his word and his laws. Number 4, life requires a certain amount of intolerance. Deuteronomy 19:13 says this, thine eye shall not pity him, but thou shalt put away the guilt of innocent blood from Israel, that it may go well with thee. That's God telling the Israelites, don't pity the people who've done terribly wrong. They have to pay for their sin. for that. Ecclesiastes 8:11 reminds us that because a sentence against an evil work is not executed immediately, it's set in the hearts of men to do evil. And that's what's wrong in America today. Way too tolerant of godless lifestyles and pagan religions and all of those things. America has become too tolerant of all of that, and interestingly, intolerant of Israel, which is not going to end well like that. But even in our country, it's led to disrespecting the flag, burning the flag in the streets. America's tolerating it just because they think everybody has their rights. Do you remember back on Andy Griffith, Opie pitching a fit when he didn't get his way? That's kind of how it is in America today. People just pitch a fit if they don't get their way, and then everybody just kind of caters to them instead of having that certain amount of intolerance. But life requires a certain amount of intolerance. What if we could drive on any side of the road we want to drive on? Things like that. Or what if our meat didn't have to be inspected because we're just going to be tolerant of whoever delivered this meat to the store and we're going to sell it as is. Things like that. My mom taught me this. She didn't put up with any foolishness at all when we were growing up. There were 5 of us, and she said, I'm going to make you a promise. If you don't embarrass me in public, I will not embarrass you in public. We learned right away Mom had a certain amount of intolerance for bad behavior, and so we straightened up right away. Straighten up and fly right. That was what our motto was. And then 5, life is shorter than you think. Psalm 39:4 says, Lord, make me to know mine end, that I may know how frail I am. The older you get, the more you realize you are truly frail. Nobody wants to think about dying, but really we should be looking ahead, shouldn't we? Whatever we're going to do for God, we should get to it because time is running out to do that. I used to have a cartoon, Thinking of Time, and I kept it by my sink when I was getting ready because it said this: what fits your schedule better, exercising 1 hour a day or being dead 24 hours a day? Yeah, life is short. You better get to whatever it is that you're going to do. I remember back when I was a kid, there were wakes like where the dead person would be in the casket in the family living room like for days, and people would just come by and look at great grandma or whoever it was. All kinds of things. Do you remember when they used to bury people and tie a bell on a rope around their ankle or whatever and leave it out of the grave? I'm telling you the truth. Leave it out of the grave somehow that worked like with a rope anyway, so that if something for some reason I guess they weren't embalmed in those days and they weren't really dead when they buried them, they could ring the bell and somebody would know that somebody had been buried alive. Okay, I'm glad we're past those days, but I will say it's a reminder that life is short and we're all going that way. At some point, if God doesn't call us out of here, Jesus doesn't call for us, time marches on. I love this quote. If you read history, you will find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were precisely those who thought most of the next. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this one. Okay, that's 5. Number 6. People have infinite worth. Genesis 1:27 says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. What does that mean? We're different than the animal kingdom. We can respond to God. We can, but if we had 4 legs, we don't. He made us in his image, so we can imagine that he looks a lot like we look. We look a lot like he looks. Do you remember Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father? And he had very much a human form, like they made all of us humans to have. Our physical characteristics, our personal calling, reflect the God who made us. We have an ability to reason and to choose our own destiny. I will say this, the Spirit draws. God knows who will be drawn to that Spirit. And I think he continues to give them the faith when he sees that the faith is there. He already knows, but it's in our hearts. Ecclesiastes 3 talks about eternity being set in our hearts, the world set in our hearts. God did put that inside us with that conscience that he gives us. Even lost people have a conscience. Even though we're not basically good, which is the next point. People are not basically good. Romans 3:10, there is none righteous, no, not one. Paul said this in Romans 7:18, for I know that in me, that is in my flesh, dwelleth no good thing. That's Paul. And remember, once he was converted, he was a different man He had to always live with his past, at least in the back of his mind, and he just went on and did what God had called him to do. Even though we're not basically good, we're of infinite worth because we were created in the image of God. And not basically good. Why are toddlers stingy? Why do grade school kids gang up on weaker kids? Why do teenagers get jealous and use people? And for us adults, why do adults gossip and murmur and envy and covet? Yeah, we do all of those things because we're not basically good. We're only good with whatever God has done with us and in us, for sure. I love this. I heard that God has his own witness protection program. New name, new identity, new destination, all of the things. His own witness protection program. He changes us from the inside out. He's creating us to be more like him. Number 8, nobody has it all together, despite public appearance. Nobody has it all together. You may look at some people and think, oh, they always look like they have their act together, you know, just all fixed and everything goes right and they're organized and all of the things. Nobody has it all together. Not all of the time. I remember seeing a magazine article with Michelle Pfeiffer, if you remember her from way back in the day, on the front cover, but there was an article that went with that. I'm not sure where I found that, but for her picture to be on the front cover of the magazine, there were 1,500 touch-ups that had to be done. Now, you would look at Michelle Pfeiffer and think, she's gorgeous. She is just perfect. It's perfect skin, perfect hair, perfect all of the things. But no, 1,500 touch-ups. What in the world could have been wrong with her? Like, she looks so good every time you'd see her on TV. But nobody has it all together. But my verse I claim, feel free to claim it too, is 1 Corinthians 15:10, where Paul said, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. And then he goes on to say, and his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain. He determined to take that and make it happen for God because he didn't want the grace that God had given him to be bestowed upon him in vain. Some people are geniuses. Some are beautiful. Some are wealthy. Some are fantastic athletes. Some are unbelievably popular, but everybody has had an embarrassing moment. Nobody has it all together. I like this. You'll like it too. A quote that said, I'm smart and funny, but I'm not a size 6. God had to be fair. And since I'm only 5'2", I like the thing of we're just a fun size if we're short, right? Let's claim it, girls. Sir Thomas Beecham, the British conductor, saw a distinguished looking lady in a hotel foyer. He knew her, but he couldn't quite recall her name. Thought she had a brother. So he asked how her brother was and if he were still working the same job, just trying to figure out who she is. And she replied, oh, he's very well and he's still king. Yeah, it was the king's sister. Sir Thomas Beecham, British conductor, and everybody would have thought he had it all together. An embarrassing moment. There you go. Everybody wrestles with their own personal insecurities. We don't want people to know that we have failed or messed up or had a shameful past or ever doubted God or that we don't have faith enough to think he's going to answer a prayer that we're praying. Just take the pressure off and try humility and honesty, but by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain. Just be genuine. I think people appreciate that. Just be real. Number 9, nobody gets away with anything. Don't I know that? Numbers 32:23 says this, and be sure your sin will find you out. I think for some people, if God has a call on their life, particularly, he keeps them on a short leash. They really don't get away with anything. I never did. You might have heard me tell about when I was 17 years old and I'd gone to I ran out in my short pajamas to go to pick my sister up from a late night youth activity. And I went through a neighborhood that we had been told not to go through, but I was just going to take a shortcut. It was late at night. Who would ever know, right? But on the back of that subdivision by a dilapidated old ball field with not a house in sight, the front axle of my car broke and the front end of my car hit the pavement and both tires on the front went off, one to the left and one to the right. It's pitch black. There's nothing around, pitch black. And we had to get out. This was before cell phones. This was 1974, maybe. We had to get out and walk to a house, knock on the door at midnight, and ask to use the phone to call my dad, who was the one who had told us not to go through that neighborhood a while back, and we knew not to go through there. And we had to tell him what had happened, and he met us there along with the police. And the only thing that saved our skin that night is the police said if they had been on the interstate, it would have killed them. They would have gone through the windshield. That's back before we had to wear seatbelts or anything like that. Nobody gets away with anything, and be sure your sin will find